Thank you for joining. I'm Sherry from Sunflowers and Petals. Today we are talking about pushing the limits both physically and mentally to live your dreams. If you enjoy this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe. Joining me from Australia and Arizona are ultra endurance runner Katie Visco and her husband Henley Phillips. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So all I can say is, holy crap, I'm blown away by your accomplishments. Let's first talk about your solo run across the United States back in 2009. What was the motivation behind this cross-country run? And also give me some stats behind that.
Stats. I'll have to remember some of the stats, but I think I'll start with the motivation of it. I think just coming out of college, I instead decided to do a year of service and worked with high school students. And so in that time, in that year working with high school students, I fell into somewhat of a mentorship role with those students, and I heard all kinds of goals and dreams from these kids. And at the same time, I remember being really taken aback by the fact that they hadn't gotten those types of questions before in their life. Like, what do you want to do with your life? Or what inspires you? Or do you have any passions that you want to apply to anything in your life? Like, what would it take to live those out? And so it was like asking those questions for the very first time. And coming from my background, I was asked those questions growing up. And so I was surprised that it wasn't being asked of them, like these kids who had so much potential. And so I decided to live out this dream that I had had for a long time, to run across America and do it for that reason, to ask as many people as possible questions about their own passions and how they want to apply them in their life, like young and old and middle-aged, like doesn't even matter. But the questions are what I was wanting to ask across the whole country. That was the motivation for that.
Okay. And what are some of the stats from that run?
Oh yeah, stats. Okay, so it was end of March 2009. And it was started in Boston, where I was living at the time. And so it was exactly 9 months to the day, finishing December 2009 at the shores of in San Diego. And so it was average like 19 or 20 miles a day, because I would finish running by like 1 o'clock, and the afternoons were spent being hosted by local families or municipalities, and doing events and speaking at schools. So there were over 200 speaking engagements that I did over 9 months across the nation to all kinds of groups. So it was like, it wasn't necessarily about the running. It was about meeting people and addressing people and communicating with people.
And did you run every day, or did you have days off?
I think I systematically ran 6 days a week. So yeah, every 7th day I would take off. Mm-hmm.
It's still remarkable. That's just crazy. So then 10 years later, 2019, you decide to run 2,112 miles in 119 days across the Australian Outback. But this time there was a twist. You recruited Henley to support you on a bicycle. So why not use vehicles? And how did you convince him to join you by bike?
I think I secretly wanted to marry him. So
you weren't married yet.
We weren't married. We weren't married when we started planning, but we were married when we did the run a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Unbeknownst to me, at least, back when we started planning this together, I just really liked this man. I really liked this guy. I wanted to adventure with him. So hey, you wanna be the support instead of a car? So.
And did it take much convincing?
No, not at all. In fact, I don't think at the very, very beginning, this was like 2013 or 14 when the idea first came up to me. We didn't have so much of an idea, whether it be car or bicycle or what it would be. So at the very beginning, it was just me supporting whatever that would look like.
Okay.
And then I guess I kind of suggested my own fate, which was I could support you on a bicycle. So it was my idea to do the bike thing, and I was a little, I don't know if naive is the right word, but I was just misinformed as to like what this would entail, what our route would mean for trying to support on a bicycle. So when I suggested that, I just thought I had done a little bit of bike touring beforehand, and thought, well, I only use like half the space on my bike that I could use for carrying stuff. So I would just double up and carry enough for two people. And so that was my logic when I said, yeah, I'll support you, and why don't we do it on a bike?
So
Turned out to be carrying a lot more stuff than just 4 panniers.
yeah, so you said you did bike touring. Did you do bike packing before this?
No, at that point, I didn't know anything about that. It was just traveling with a couple of panniers and a sleeping bag attached to my handlebars. That was what I had done.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how much cycling were you doing a year?
Well, Katie and I, all of our commuting, well, I'd say probably 90% of our commuting in daily life is by bike.
Okay.
So that's just what we do. We get around by bike, and the two of us together and individually have done a good bit of bike touring. We did eventually get into the bike packing thing. So we've done a couple of trips together prior to this. So yeah, I felt pretty comfortable on the bike. And I think the main thing is that we felt comfortable together doing these kinds of things in remote or difficult situations. So the run and the distance was unique, but the kind of the bones of the experience, the two of us doing something on our own together, we had done before.
Great. So walk me through your bike setup and how you manage the extra, I guess, 400 pounds of food, water, and gear.
Yeah, so in total it was about that much. So the bike is a Surly Troll, kind of an off-road touring bike, and then behind that I pulled a trailer, a trailer that could fit kind of like 4 25-gallon water jugs, and so 25-liter water jugs. Okay. So that 100 liters there's 220 pounds just in water on the trailer. So the weight, it was easy to get up pretty quickly and weight just from the water. Yeah. So a bike in the trailer, and then on the bike, I essentially had every bike bag that you could imagine, from like a traditional touring setup to a bike packing setup to, like, I had all 4 panniers. I had stuff strapped to the back of the seat, the handlebars. It had it all. We had a big 40-liter dry bag that would go on top of the water on the back of the trailer when we had long stretches without food resupply. Had the repair kit, had it all. Had it all.
That's a lot of weight to be hauling.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So this question is really for both of you. How many calories did you burn a day, and how did you stay hydrated in such intense heat in the Outback?
This is an interesting question because I remember sitting under one of the rare trees out there calculating how many calories we were eating over the first few weeks and realizing that we needed to be eating more. And I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but I remember thinking, okay, I'm having this, and this. What if I have 2 of everything that I was eating? So in a sense, partway through, I ended up really doubling up on the stuff that I was eating, because without counting the calories, I can't quite remember, but it was eating pretty much every hour something. Mm-hmm. In terms of hydration, Henley really kept us together in terms of always having enough water. You know what we did for that more than me.
Yeah, well, the first couple of weeks, there was a lot of figuring things out. So the food and water, how much we were consuming. And of course, at that point, you don't have that kind of ravenous hunger that you get later on in the trip. Mm-hmm. So we were trying to gauge how much are we eating and drinking. And I just had a 3-liter bladder that I would fill that up and then disperse it to our smaller water bottles so that I could keep an accurate track of how much water through the day. And then whenever we were calculating stops in between water, I would just, use my calculations that I had been doing to make sure we had enough. And then at one point it got hot enough to where we were using some of that water sparingly to soak, like Katie wore sun sleeves.
Right.
We would soak her sun sleeves or soak a bandana and put it around us to keep us cool. So at some point we were just carrying all the water that we possibly could and just yeah, being sparing with it was always a trick, but you also need the water on you and in you to keep going. So, but that 3-liter Hydro Pack that we used was key to knowing how much we had been using in the day. And then at the end of the day, how much had we actually used? And did we have like maybe a liter left over, and could we use that to take a shower at the end of the day? So those kind of things are important.
Now, did you run mostly like in the mornings or when it was cooler, or how did you do that?
Oh, did I run mostly in the mornings? Is that what you asked? Yeah. Okay. So at the very beginning of the trip, the first like week or two, we were beginning at like 7 a.m. And so that wasn't working out too great because I ended up really running in the middle of the day before we took our long break in the afternoon. So we changed that up after day 10 and started running at 5:30. So would get up at like little before 5 and then be running by 5:30. And that was a huge game changer to be running for at least an hour and a half in the darkness before the sunrise was some of my favorite like moments of the trip, just being able to be in the dark and seeing the sunrise.
Yeah, that golden hour when you have a sunrise is just magical.
Well, yeah. So just the way that worked is like I would run for an hour and a half, we'd take a 30-minute break, run for an hour and a half, 30-minute break, one more hour and a half, 30-minute break, and then a long 3 to 4 hour break under our own shade if there weren't any trees or under some kind of bush thing, and then go out for another like hour and a half, 2 hours to make 30 miles a day. So it was all in chunks.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you both stay motivated and optimistic for 119 days?
Oh, well, we were talking about this the other day. Very early on, we started talking about what we wanted to do after the trip was over. I don't even think we were like 2 full weeks in, and we started thinking about where do we want to go afterwards to relax. Which is funny because you are so ready to do something like this, and then when you're in it, you're thinking, oh, what am I going to do when I'm not doing this anymore? But that really was quite a lot of it, kind of like daydreaming and having practical and or silly conversations throughout the day. But I guess a lot of it was actually solo time because we weren't really running or cycling at the same pace, because when we were on dirt roads and the really junky dirt roads, Katie could run faster than I could pedal. And then vice versa on the pavement, it was easier for me than it was for her. So most of the time was actually kind of in our own head. And then when we had our breaks is when we might talk about future plans or something funny or just sleep. We read to each other, or I read to Katie out loud to pass the time. Personally, I'm pretty good at just kind of like letting the miles go by and not needing to think about too much. I don't know about you, Katie, but
yeah. I think in terms of like to Henley's point, like just thinking about all kinds of things that were entertaining was really nice. Like we got down in specific, almost to the countertops as to like what we wanted the kitchen to look like in the little place we wanted to rent after we're done with this thing. And so just getting to the details and entertaining ourselves like that was fun. I would say in terms of motivation, that's like all over the place. And I think like as I go through my athletic life, and I was just writing about this morning, that I think I'm learning to allow myself to not be motivated all the time. And there were certain definitely moments in Australia and days and afternoons where I was not feeling it. Like am I supposed to be motivated right now because this is really hard? Can I just not be motivated and slog through these miles just to get it done? Okay, that works. So I think keeping motivated is one thing, and then keeping engaged mentally is another thing. And that for me was really the focus. And I think podcasts really helped, just holding my phone in my hand and listening to something other than my thoughts. That was really helpful.
So I assume you had like a solar charger then. Okay. And plenty of sun.
sun you can handle.
So what was the most surprising takeaway from this experience for each of you?
Well, I think one takeaway, and we came up with this little phrase to help us along, tedious but brief. That any moment that we were in that felt overly challenging or boring or endless, it would be hard for a little while, but then it would pass and you'd be on to a feeling of accomplishment or elation or just a neutral feeling afterwards. And that like it's just going to come and go and come and go, and not try to get so attached to those low moments and so worried about them. And an interesting takeaway about that is that I think that we knew that beforehand and we had experienced that, each of us individually. And I think since then we've experienced it again. These little moments that feel really challenging and tedious, but they'll pass in a matter of hours or days. And it's just interesting to me that you learn the same lesson over and over and over. And it doesn't make it any easier in the moment when it's like, oh, this is a lesson I learned last year and this other thing. I guess
Great perspective. Yeah.
The mind is resilient and fickle in that regard. It can allow itself to be beaten up and remember again, and then beaten up and remember again that it's actually okay and it'll work out.
Yeah. How about you, Katie?
In terms of a takeaway, I think I just was able to see my husband experience all kinds of emotions, and I think I like that. I like that I got to see different layers of my husband. I don't know how you feel about me saying that, Henley, but I do. I appreciated that because we're all human and have so many layers. And so I got to see him be really down on himself, and I got to see him really get just like all kinds of emotions. And I'm sure he got to see me in all kinds of emotions too. And so a takeaway was just learning more about my husband. And I think that's the most beautiful takeaway from this. It's not like the accomplishment between him and I or myself or for him. It's like how we grew as a couple and what we learned about each other that'll really carry forward for me.
Yeah, I think that's invaluable. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So I always like to ask my endurance guests, what's the one guilty pleasure you took on the journey, since minimizing gear and weight is so crucial?
Mm-hmm. There's a few things that come to mind for me. Henley, I wonder if you would agree or disagree, but I think the fact that we had a book with us, and sometimes like we had a big book, that 80 days book. Yeah. And I think the fact that Henley was able to read out loud to us during our 3 to 4 hour breaks, those were definitely my favorite moments. Just lying out under the sky, listening to Henley read a really engaging story. And it was a big book. So I would say that. Another thing comes to mind, I think, but what about you, Henley?
I do feel like everything that we took was very well planned. Like everything served a purpose in terms of moving us forward, keeping us moving forward. But I would say a book is kind of like the one thing that we could have done without him and just fine. I was gonna say like a lot of coffee and cookies. I always made sure we had that I had plenty of coffee and cookies, but that's actually useful and practical calories to keep you going. Yeah, I think I'd say the book. I think having some kind of entertainment that was outside of ourselves was really important.
Yeah. Remember wet wipes? We had wet wipes. I feel like that could have been left out, but we took them because we wanted to feel fresh every once in a while. And I brought like some, tea tree oil, so I can actually smell good too every once in a while. Those were, I feel like that was a.
Well, probably helped that you both smelled, so then you didn't really notice each other.
Yeah.
So, Katie, you're in Australia now. What's on tap for your next challenge?
Absolutely. So I'm currently in this beautiful hotel room because it's 14 days of quarantine for anyone coming into the country. And so for almost anyone coming into the country. So I am about to join a team of 3 other American runners who are all here in this hotel, and then 4 Australian runners. And together we are going to be running across basically half of Australia from the center to Byron Bay. On the East Coast. And the reason for this run is to do well, the way it's going to work is it's a relay style. So America versus Australia, see who wins, but it's more a run of camaraderie and doing this together, relay style, to show some good news, really. This is a run about good news and how we can be hopeful and resilient out of a really challenging year and a half. So together as ultra runners, that's the messaging that we want to put out there, that you can take on hard things, whether they be up here or in your legs, or if you're running across, or if you're having a really hard season of life. I'm really looking forward to this project because it has that mental health slant to it. But yeah, it begins in 3 weeks from now. So 2 weeks here, and then pre-stuff, and then the run begins. And it's a 10-day run, 1,000 miles in 10 days.
Wow, great.
Mhm.
So thank you both for your time today. If someone wants to follow your adventures or watch your documentary 2112, I had to get that right. Where should they go, or how can they follow you?
Go for it, dear.
Okay. In terms of the movie, yeah, we made a movie of this adventure that we've been talking about in Australia. And the best way to find it is you can go to my website. It's katievisco.com, and there's a link to the movie there. Or you can go on Instagram. It's Katie Visco, or Henley.Phillips. There's a link in each of our bios there to watch the film. We'd love for y'all to watch the film because we're really proud of it and excited about that art we put out there. What else, Henley?
I think you covered. That's it. Best spot. It's on Vimeo, but you can find it in those on social media or your website.
And I'll definitely put the link in the blog and the YouTube listening.
Thank you, Sherry. Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And thanks for watching another Sunflowers and Petals video. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button and make sure to subscribe and enjoy the ride.